All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Ryan Hitzel, founder of Roark, and I'm sitting here with Nate Zoller, our original ambassador. It's been some time that we've traveled together, hasn't it?
Yeah, Ryan. Yeah, it's been over 10 years now. So,
Sick. That's crazy to think about.
yeah.
Stoked to have you here. We're just gonna spin a few yarns, talk some story real quick. Kind of I guess, a opportunity to hear some of my thoughts and stretches of the imagination from on the road. Probably ramble a bit as usual. Maybe a slight bit of pontificating. I'll see how deep we get here, but yeah, man. Thanks
Always.
for
Thanks for
joining.
having me. Yeah, it's awesome. I can't wait to dive into this trip.
Before that trip, let's talk about the last year. Um, I think Rourke's been on this interesting little voyage. We've always tried to experiment a little bit with our travels and storytelling and product making, and we certainly had an interesting year of travels. Went to Hokkaido and Rishiri. Um, Pretty rad trip. Approached it totally differently. I think we saw some success and some failure. I think you maybe were a part of a little bit of the failure on Rishiri, and it's so hard to plan these trips and connect them back to everything that we're all about, and have it all work out over a couple weeks time. And then we went to Sardinia, which you weren't on, correct? No,
Mhm.
didn't make the
No,
cut. Maybe didn't want to go.
I was gonna go on this surf trip portion, but yeah.
But we failed. We didn't make it
Oh,
back
so
to time it to
yeah.
swell. So yeah, another trip where we I think got even more experimental and kind of went to a place that was different. Sardinia being something that was really interesting and alluring to us, and we were trying to find some different pathways through it to um, to see new places and explore a bit and sort of travel in the way that we've always done. But it proved a little more difficult, a little more of a resort island, and as much as we kind of bobbed and weaved, kind of knocked us out a little bit. But had some ideas for content that were pretty wild. And I think the cool part about that trip was we ended up with an epic sort of auditory masterpiece that Matt Costa put together. Matt was on the trip and um, was there directing with Jeff Johnson, sort of a film concept that proved to be a little bit too difficult for us all to figure out, at least in the time that we had. So maybe we'll see that down the line. But I guess the fruit of all of that was um, the exploration of sights and sounds that Matt did. You see that? Did you hear that?
Yeah, yeah, that was epic. Going to see it live at the Rivian just brought me back to kind of the old school surf premiere vibe. And yeah, it kind of gives you chicken skin whenever you kind of get in those kind of moments. It's kind of what made you want to be a surfer in the beginning.
Totally.
So
Live
yeah.
music in a theater with epic visuals. He's such a storyteller too. It's so rad to listen to all the inspiration behind the songs that he wrote on the road there, and that was epic. Stoked on that.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I guess it kind of brings me to today, where I go back. It was about a year ago. We're trying to figure out where we're going to go next, and we had a bunch of different ideas, and we settled on a trip to northern Norway to try and get out there. And you said old school. Maybe, dare I say, get back to a little bit more of the old school roots of our travels and adventures together, and seemed to be a pretty radical palette to maybe um, paint, a new picture, but rely on some of the same colors and tools and mediums that we've had in the past. So it's pretty funny. Snacks.
Yeah.
Ryan, Alec, photographer. I've been just super impressed by his work. He goes on like National Geographic Explorer trips to Antarctica and like real deal, like expedition grade
Mhm.
um, content capturing and artistry. And so we had been talking and he's like, I want to pitch you on a trip. And I'm like, oh, I haven't had anybody like pitch me on a trip, maybe ever, maybe once or twice, but it's been some time. And I'm like, right on, yeah, you got to pitch this thing, man. You got to like put together a deck and like come in here and we'll get the team together. It's gonna be sick, And he's like, okay, okay. So he shows up with this like amazing presentation, like multimedia presentation, and of course Snacks prefaced it with it was the first presentation he'd ever put together. So I think his girlfriend Courtney may have helped quite a bit. But yeah, he came in and pitched, and the whole premise of the pitch was like, dude, we're gonna get Roark back to old school Roark, like with the legends behind it, like you're like a legend, and like we got to get back to the way we used to do it. And I'm just like, wait a second, old school? Like, what is old school Roark? I didn't know that we were in the old school category. And then why are you calling me a legend? So I'm like, what's happening right now? But I love what you're saying. He's like, yeah, man, like let's get dirty. Let's get out there and get vulnerable and get cold and um, swim with the sharks again and go somewhere super gnarly and try and capture it in a way that's, both authentic but kind of modern and real and no apologies. So definitely achieved that. And you were able to go on that trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe give us just a short little rundown of what that trip was like, where you started. And
Yeah.
we want to save some nugs. We got like
Yeah.
months to tell this story, but I think it'd be rad to kind of wet the whistle and some of the things that maybe aligned with getting back to
Mhm.
a place that like we traveled to in the past together and what that meant.
Yeah. So I think what Snacks was prefacing old school Rourke trips, you know, some of the first trips I ever did, to Iceland was the first one, and yourself and Ryan Sirianni were leading the charge. The company was still, a couple years in, and I
As I
think,
recall, we barely made it off the plane into the blizzard.
yeah, yeah, going into that trip, flying over there was its own trip, and then landing in a blizzard, and then, seeing how you and Ryan Sirianni kind of operated on the ground, was pretty inspiring for me to see, and also just to see how the wheels were turning, with you guys on production, and also like just getting out there and being in it and not, dancing around anything, making it as real as possible. And that meant you guys in front of the camera as well, and kind of in the water surfing with us, doing it. And I think that's what Snacks was kind of getting at, was like just being out there and doing it because you love it. And yeah, I think that's resonated with a lot of people, because anybody can go out and get on these adventures and do it themselves. It just takes a lot of grit and planning and hard work, and kind of just determination when things are going south. You got to kind of pick your head up and keep going.
The gold.
Um,
Those are always the best parts of the trip, like when we would lose you in Vietnam, or you're in the streets of Cuba and you're about to be abducted, and you got to think quickly of how to get out of situations. And so many like the failures were like the raddest parts of those trips anyway.
Totally. And I
Figuring out how
feel,
to push through.
yeah, it seems like the more polished things get with, how you go into a trip, trying to get everything sorted and in line, the more polished it is trying to be, the less real sometimes it can feel. So, I think the old school sentiment is just, go in prepared, but just go in with an open mind, and just kind of let reality take hold of, like, if a storm's going to come in, it's going to come in. We're going to deal with it, and we're going to, have enough wood for the fire to last us. And so going to Norway, I think that was the sentiment that we were trying to bring to the
Yeah.
trip.
And I know for sure that Rod and I are not the keys to a successful trip. Thanks for the props, but we've seen plenty of road trips that were beyond successful without us being there. But definitely in that conversation with Snacks and sort of him as, I guess, like a follower of the brand over the years, he's probably like what, 25, 26? Guessing
Maybe a little bit more, like 28,
28. Okay.
30. I don't know.
So he's old.
He
He's
looks
old
really young.
too.
He's old,
Uh,
yeah.
but like, you try and set like a foundation for what people expect, right? And then you got to grow from there. And um, I think for me, just trying to put a team together that at a destination with a plan, with sort of an itinerary that's malleable, um, really is what kind of, gets you to the goal. It's going to evolve from there, but yeah, definitely don't need me. I mean, I'd like to get back on one. That'd be kind of sick. I don't know if my
Yeah,
wife would let me, my kids are kind of like, yeah, you got to get back out there, Dad.
you do. Yeah,
Wife's
you
like,
do.
no, you don't. You need to take practice. But the stage was set and it was so rad and so motivating to hear, Ryan, kind of preach the gospel and have like his own vision of how that trip wanted to be and how he wanted to shoot it. Obviously, I'll just set this up a little bit for you.
Mm,
We shot a film that comes out here in about a month, and it's directed by Harrison Roach. It's got yourself, Mackenzie Bowden, and Catalina Hotz. And it was shot by Jake Berghard, who's a old friend of ours and had shot their trip to Vancouver Island some time ago. Um, just a G, like such a rad documentarian. Um, and yeah, we hooked you up with a guide that I think Bo Flemister had originally
mm.
discovered. Bo's a writer and has been on a lot of Roark trips and have something coming out in the journal, Surfer's Journal, I think a 16-page expose on the trip. So looking forward to that. So I feel like set it up good. You've been on 15 plus trips with the brand. So between you and Harrison, two veterans, I feel like you guys just took it and ran.
Yeah. So just
And I
on
didn't get
the
a single phone call until shit went wrong at the end, just before the end. It
I remember
was a
that
good
phone
sign.
call. We were all huddled around the phone like, oh shit. Uh
You're gonna stay for 2 more weeks, boys.
yeah,
You're not
we
going to
might
the
have to go
Faroes.
somewhere else. Uh, but we're used to that, in those trips. It's like you gotta, like I said, you gotta be a little bit flexible and but yeah, going into that trip, I remember flying over Greenland on the way to Oslo and I couldn't sleep. I was just thinking about what was gonna happen on the trip and just all the possibilities of the next, 10 days, which happens, on those flights going into the trips. I just am always thinking about what's gonna happen, but you gotta kind of let it go. Everyone's asleep on the flight around me, and I'm like, open the window shade, and it's just the freaking northern lights, like dancing, like green. Just, I thought I was kind of like hallucinating, kind of like rub the sleep out of my eyes type thing, but I just put my face on that plexiglass for like 10 minutes, and we're just moving, so we're kind of going past it
Yeah,
and looking around. Nobody's talking, nobody's awake. The pilot doesn't bring it up. Like I'm like, dude, what is going on? And so I had this like kind of chicken skin moment going into the trip, like not even there yet. And I'm
at the
like,
stage.
yeah, kind of
Something
set the
magical
stage.
was about to happen.
Something was happening, like the universe was starting to work its way in
Hey,
our
when
favor,
that universe
hopefully.
speaks, like you don't listen, it's gonna punish you.
Yeah. Yeah. So we landed, I remember in Oslo, met up with the crew, and then we flew to the outer airport where we landed for our final destination and got picked up by Carlos. And we were on our way. It was like a 2-hour drive to the fjord we were staying at. And the Northern Lights showed up again, like on the drive. We're just kind of chatting, just that energy, the beginning of a trip, chatting,
Spirit guide.
spirit guide, like cracking the beers in the car, the beginning of the trip feeling where you're just like asking Carlos a million questions about, setups and the waves. And
Yeah.
um,
I
yeah,
don't
I
want
just
you to,
remember
so I don't
that.
want you to go too far.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I
yeah.
got 4 months to tell the story, but you're a writer and you've always had a chance to come back and share your stories and sort of your POV on it. So what are some things that you intend to write about? You see
Yeah.
obviously probably write a little bit about surfing and whatnot, but was there anything else that kind of flashed before you outside the Northern Lights that was interesting and you think you're gonna pen?
Yeah, I mean, there was a ton of stuff to talk about on that trip. I wanted like right away to go into, what a place that cold feels like as a surfer. It's kind of hard to sum it up. We were trying to like voice that while we were there. Like, how do you, beyond just being like it's fucking cold, like how do you get that across? Because it's like a whole nother layer of cold beyond
How cold?
So the water was I think 37.
What?
Yeah. And so I think that the air was, below freezing multiple days. So it's like bone chilling cold. It's not like, mammoth is cold, but let's add another layer onto that. Like and then you're putting on a wetsuit. So
And
that's a
the waves aren't always good or even worthy for that
and the
temperature
yeah, exactly. It's onshore some
confrontation.
days. It's snowing, you're on the beach, you're like, what are we doing? Like, how am I gonna pull this one off? And so there was that element, just that extra kind of coldness. And then there's other stuff like, what do you pack? What do you bring? What do you need? What kind of boards do you want to bring? Because these are all things that seem really obvious, but once you get there, you're like, fuck, I wish I had a couple more liters on my board, or I wish, I had an extra wetsuit outside of the one because this thing won't dry overnight,
So for all 12 people out there in the world, and probably the two that are listening to this, you're gonna know it's packed.
Yeah.
Just in the
Yeah.
Arctic.
Yeah,
Making
exactly.
sure to cover the masses, huh?
Yeah. And you don't know exactly what you need until you get there and you realize you don't have it, right? So it's like um just compiling those kind of lists and just trying to help out, the next guy that wants to do these kind of crazy missions. I mean, there's a ton of stuff to talk about. The waves, the people, the culture, the weather, the just I can go on and on. A lot of it was mental. When you're on the ground and you're trying to
Always
score,
been. Yeah.
always mental. Like, I don't know if it's just me, but like I'm just always in my head in those trips, like just trying to get past that, like, don't do it kind of thing, that fight or flight mode, you know?
What's like having a cat like Mackenzie in those moments? It's like
Yeah.
really like nude or like dancing nude. I
He
saw some
was it was funny because I remember I was gonna jump off the dock into the water, and there's like all these icebergs and stuff, and I'm like just pumping myself up, kind of like, all right, like pound a beer or whatever. And here comes Mackenzie, runs straight past me in his tidy whities, and he just jumps off like no worries. And then he gets onto an iceberg and he starts doing his like little dance routine
yeah.
for an extended amount of time. Like,
It was
I'm
like
not
the
talking like
proper icebreaker, no pun intended.
exactly. I'm not talking like 10, 15 seconds dance around. He was on that iceberg for like 5 minutes.
He
And
milk.
we're like, he was just fucking going for it. And we're like, dude, are you gonna be okay? Uh and but he just like kind of that's just kind of him. He doesn't really care or like overthink things. Like, and that's kind of,
You're sitting there analyzing everything, the
yeah,
cerebral being that you are, and Mackenzie just lives in the moment on it. He's
he
got
just
his
does
mind,
it.
you got yours.
Exactly. And you kind of need that as a crew. You need a little difference in kind of process and how you're perceiving stuff and what you're doing. So um the crew was like on point. Everyone brought something to the table. Um, Harrison was uh directing and getting the most out of us as far as, interviews go. Like, he knew each person a little bit and what might bring some cool dialogue out of them. And then having Jake there was awesome. Like, because he's done running gun shooting for Vice for, ever, and you could see that in his like tenacity to get the shots and get the interviews and get it in the moment and not wait like, oh, we'll get that later. Like, no, we got to get this right
When you're
now.
being flown into war zones and dropped off with cartels, blindfolded, in Colombia, this was probably like child's play for him.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, he's like, oh, yeah, I was in this area, a couple years ago, with the Russians on the border, and I'm like, what? You know what I mean? Like, so he's just got stories for days, and
And
having someone that was that good was
I remember we were picking his brain early on. We're like, what stories do you want to tell? You've been there. And he's like, dude, I just want to surf. And I'm like, okay, check that box. And he's like, and there's this like really sick Norwegian death metal band that like I think the guy went to jail for cannibalism or something, but I can get an interview. And I think he
yeah.
actually tried. You guys didn't hook up with that guy?
No, but it was like we were talking
It was
about it.
top of mind, huh?
Yeah, yeah,
He
yeah.
was trying to make it happen.
Definitely brought it up on it a couple times on the trip. But yeah, like the crew made the trip work, and having Carlos and his knowledge of the area, um, it's paramount. Like that's kind of one of those things that I might, end up talking about writing wise is the importance of a good fixer, a good guide. I
Mm.
think we carried that across pretty much all of the Roark trips. It's like going into it, you gotta have someone on the ground that you can trust and that can help, get our vision across, and then, end up with this film that we're, producing and getting ready to launch. So um, everyone had their own little um, add-ons to making this thing move and go. And yeah, it was one of those trips that, it's pretty hard to pull off. And to get what we got, I mean, that's huge. I don't know if any of us expected that.
Do you
So
have any personal meltdowns?
shit. I mean, I I just remember um getting to the beach. It was like day 5. We hadn't surfed yet, and we had all this hope. Like we drove, 2 hours to get to this exposed piece of coast, and we get there, and it's like a snowstorm, like an onshore sleet, snow in your face. You're trying to check it, and you're like, "That's it," and it's just waves breaking onto rocks, and we're like, "Fuck!" And Carlos is like, "You guys want to surf?" And we're like, "This is it," you know what I mean? And you're kind of like fucking kicking the snow on the ground, and you're thinking like, "What are we doing right now?" And you kind of have those moments on these trips where it's so um yeah, it's just kind of mental, like bringing it back to that. And so that day I remember where we went and got lunch instead of surfing because it was just not happening. And I remember talking to our waiter, and he came from an outer island that, they have to carry a shotgun because the polar bears are everywhere. And it kind of put that into perspective where we were. And then you leave the lunch feeling a little bit better, a couple of beers in you, and we went and checked this other spot, and still snowing, but there was more of a wave, and so we ended up setting up these tents on the beach. And I remember like the morale was back, and Harrison jumped out there on his log, and kind of fired us up to just kind of like
Keep going.
do it. Yeah, keep keep going, and like keep
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 searching.
trying, because there's always moments where you're like, fuck this, where you're just like, this is gnarly.
I
But
think
then
it's always those moments where you question like the why, where
yeah.
you're like literally, why are we doing this? Why am I doing this?
Mm.
Why am I 30 something years old and still traveling to the outskirts of, the Arctic to surf, to discover
Yeah.
like I remember feeling that a few times. Big time was that trip to Vietnam when remember when we lost you for a little bit on a
Yeah.
motorcycle and
Yeah.
Rod and I were just looking at each other like, what are we doing and why? Like we
Mhm.
lost Nate. We always lose somebody.
The heat stroke
Lost
setting
you.
in.
Yeah, heat stroke settling in. We're like somewhere 150 miles outside of Hanoi, and we're on the road, and it's like fuck, felt pretty. I don't know. It always feels like you're pushing the edge, the envelope of danger and freedom and everything in between. And yeah, that was one of those moments where we're like, so wait, we're doing this all to sell like t-shirt and go on all these trips together with our friends. Like, well, we gotta like maybe realign our priorities. And then
Yeah,
a minute later, when you start to sniff the reward, you're like, yeah, no, this is why we're doing it. We're doing it.
yeah,
Definitely learn something about ourselves and share these great times with great people. So
yeah. And like
it pays off.
after those first couple trips to Iceland and Vietnam, where it was just really gnarly and really, like you said, pushing the envelope on hot, cold, just tough conditions. Coming back from those trips is when I started to realize how impactful they were in my mind. Like you can't stop thinking about them, and those are the best stories to tell or to reiterate to your friends and family. It's easy to tell the story because it was so mentally impactful, or it was tough, it was it was hard, and then you hopefully persevere and you kind of come out the other end a little bit better off because of it. And I think that's what we're a little bit addicted to, right? Is going out and proving to ourselves that we can pull this off and we can get waves here. We can, you know, ride all day and pull this off. And so yeah, I think that was getting back to the old school Roark sentiment, was going out to the Arctic and just making it happen, finding waves and kind of telling the story on the other side. So yeah.
Well, more to come. Just want to kind of get some of that out in the open. Um, just launching our fall holiday destination, Norway. Um, one big story amongst many others over the next 4 to 6 months here, but super exciting. Got the film directed by Harrison that he's just putting the finishing touches on right now, shot by Jake Birdhart. We got a Rattle artist collab with getting Bendick, sort of a heavy metal graphic dude that did everything from t-shirts to sweaters. Really rad local kind of builder maker that we connected with in Norway. And yeah, super excited to start to share all this stuff with the world. And Nate, you're gonna play a role here, so looking for some words from you. And stoked. Thanks for spending 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Stoked.
All good. I love, it's always fun to, relive those moments on the trips and stuff. So I love kind of rehashing it on paper and then, trying to, let people live through what we have done out there. And yeah, I think that this film is going to be um really powerful in that aspect. And I can't wait to see it. It's been
Have you seen anything?
I saw the kind of teaser, but I haven't seen the whole deal with all the interviews. So
Yeah.
should be, yeah, I don't even know what to expect because we did so many interviews across the whole trip that, it's like, what did I even talk about? What were, I just remember like Jake and Harry being there for almost every moment, just like kind of um being there for the emotion and the reactions and stuff. And I think that's what makes a good documentary is not kind of waiting to get those interviews after it all happens and being right there and kind of shoving the camera in your face like, so what's going on right now? And
So
it's
yeah, without that emotion, we're nothing. So
yeah, it's like it just makes it more real, and hopefully that comes across on the film.
cool. Well, I can't wait to watch it with you. Hopefully it'll be
Yeah,
for the first time and we can get some honest feedback from you.
yeah, can't
Cool.
wait. So
Yeah, Nate, thanks.
coming soon. All right, thank you.
Thanks everybody. We'll keep doing this. It's fun.
Yeah.
See ya.